Hello, everybody, and welcome to the One Good Day podcast. My name is Jeff. I will be your host for today. Today, we are talking to Dr. Emily Colwell. Good morning, Dr. Colwell. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great.
Fantastic. Today, we're going to be talking about the topic of I want to be normal. And that means for those that deal with anxiety and panic issues, the sentiment of wanting it to go away and just being normal again is usually an obstacle that people need to overcome. So we're going to be talking about that and some of the feelings around that with Dr. Colwell. But before we get started, Dr. Colwell, why don't you introduce yourself, tell everybody about your specialty and where they can find you online.
Sure thing. So, I am Dr. Emily Colwell, and I am a naturopathic doctor and a clinical social worker. And I have a specialty in emotional health and anxiety and stress. So, you can find me. My website is Dr. Emily Colwell, and it's COLWELL.com. And I have a free micro moment reset on there that can be, a lot of people find really helpful when they're navigating anxiety.
And
So
what is
I,
just not to interrupt, what is a micro moment reset while
uh,
we're explaining it?
yeah, it's a free audio download, and I take people through some steps that help them navigate anxiety in the moment, that can really turn down the volume on it. And it's
Oh,
something
okay.
that they can end up using themselves as well, doing on their
And
own as well.
and not to go down a rabbit hole this early in the podcast, but is that like a meditation, a mindfulness exercise? What type of exercise is it?
Yeah, it's kind of a combo. It really is about helping people, you know, to start right away. One of the things that I have learned for myself, because I've had anxiety my whole life, and it was my enemy for most of my life. I've had anxiety, panic, and every time it would show up, I would, oh no, get yourself together, and lots of curses on the inside of my head, and fighting against it. And I did all kinds of therapies and approaches, and I would maybe master it for just a little while, and then it would come back, and I'd be so pissed with myself that I hadn't mastered it well enough. And it really was when I started to have a different relationship with it that it changed. And so if you make a fist for a minute.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll do it.
Yes. And this represents your anxiety, panic, whatever the heck else is going on in your life that is so not what you're wanting, right? It's so unwanted. And then take your other hand and try to pry that fist open to get that anxiety and panic out of there, to make it go away, to fix it, and notice how your fist responds.
Yeah, you can't do it.
Yeah, the fist starts fighting against it, right? Even though the fist isn't having fun feeling this way, right? And this is what, as humans, we do when we have pain. And anxiety and panic is a form of pain. It's such discomfort and feels unbearable. And so, of course, as humans, we want to do this, right? But the response is that we start to have an inner war inside of ourselves, because that's where the anxiety is, right? And so if you take your other hand now, and instead of trying to pry it open, keep your fist and just gently hold your fist with your other hand, and notice how your fist responds.
It loosens.
Yeah, and it may not fly open, but there's something that softens in it. And this is what I teach people to do, is to do this dance. We're never going to stop having these times of having this response. But when we catch it and realize it, which isn't going to be all the time, but when we do realize that, and we start learning ways to shift to this, we start to have a different relationship with what this is, and it starts to give us a different experience with it. And so that micro moment reset that's on the website is one particular way that helps a person go from this to this in the moment. Now,
All
if
right.
they're in a full-fledged panic attack, it may be a little tricky, but when they're feeling anxiety that, obviously can lead up to panic, it can be really, really helpful to practice that.
Yeah,
So,
help back it down when it's at a 4 or 5 before it gets to an 8 or 9.
right. Exactly. Exactly.
So, once again, that's Dr. Emily Colwell, COLWELL.com, and Instagram is Dr.Emily_COLWELL.
Yes,
Uh,
you got
so,
it.
uh, we start every podcast talking about your personal relationship with panic and anxiety and how you dealt with it. So, you started to talk about a little bit as far as you've dealt with it all your life. Are you still dealing with it? How do you handle it? And if you're not dealing with it as much, what was the turning point, and what enabled you to get there?
Totally. Yeah, like I said, I've had anxiety my whole life, and to be honest, I didn't even know it was anxiety till I was older. I just thought I was a worrier and a stress case, and it wasn't until later that I realized, oh, this has a name. And like I said, I was fighting against it, and my whole goal the whole time was, this whole idea of feeling like, oh my God, other people don't walk around with this all the time. Like, how can I be like them? Like, how can I be normal like they
Yeah,
are? And um, so, my whole goal for so long was, what do I need to do to get rid of this problem that I have? And really, and this may not feel good for some people to hear, but what I've really come to realize is I'm never going to get rid of it. This is a part of who I am. And does it have the grip on me that it once had? No. Does it never come back and start to grip me? Yeah, it comes back. It comes back. But what my response used to be was, oh, God damn it. Oh, what's it going to take? And now it's like, oh, hey, it's you again. Okay. All right. We got this.
yeah,
And it feels so different. It's not this inner war in my body. It might be an inner war for a second or for a few minutes when it first shows up, but then I'm able to do this shift. And, the biggest turning point for me, I think, was when I started to understand that we're really made up of so many different parts of ourselves. We have so many different parts of ourselves that make up who we are, and anxiety is one of those parts for me, as it is for so many. But I think for so long I thought that anxiety part was all of me. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah. You're defined by your anxiety as a feeling that I deal with a lot. It's like this is what you have to make allowances for in your life. For right now, for example, for me, I have a hard time flying and I don't fly anymore. And it's like
Yeah.
that defines me. It's like, oh, I want to go on this trip. Well, I have to prepare and leave 2 days in advance in order to drive there or so a lot of times it defines all of you, but it's only a small part because it doesn't impact my day to day life, but it still feels like it defines my whole being.
Exactly. Exactly. And the reason that understanding that, oh, I have one part that's really anxious, and sometimes it gets really loud and is like yelling to get my attention. And what I what I've come to understand is that actually we can get to know these different parts in us, and it turns out every single part in us is on our side. Every single part. Does it feel that way in the moment? No. But some of these parts learned to respond in the way that they respond so long ago in us for a whole variety of reasons, you know, that at some point we're trying to help us or keep us safe, you know? And some of those parts have not ever had the chance to update their beliefs. So they're running on old beliefs in a new world, like in a life where we're more grown up now, right? And it makes it tricky. And it turns out we can connect with those parts and communicate with them and get to know them better. And that may sound really crazy um, off the bat. And I have lots of people I work with who come in and I talk to them about that in the first visit and they say, okay. And it sounds weird. But then when we do it, they're like, what just happened? Because they suddenly have new insight and they understand that when the anxiety is showing up, it's trying to help. And really, all of these parts, when they show up in us and get so loud, they're actually not wanting us to fix them. They're wanting us to see them and be with them while they're feeling this way. And that is the thing that has changed my experience with it. And it's changed so many people's experiences when I've worked with them. Is this, you know, it's like in the big, sometimes when anxiety will roll in, and everybody has to find their own language with it, but I will say to that part when I realize it's here, like, okay, yeah, I can feel how freaked out you are right now. I'm right
Yeah.
here. It's okay.
Yeah, you can
And
definitely feel when it's coming on.
yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you very much for sharing your personal experience, and let's dive more into. I mean, you actually touched on a little bit of what we're talking about today, as far as that sentiment among people with anxiety and just wanting to feel normal again. Can you, I guess, dive into a little bit more as far as the general feeling of that sentiment, and why that may be a misconception as far as the quote unquote use of the word normal.
I know. I mean, it's so hard because I think we as a culture, we're taught to use this lens of wrongness to look at ourselves and the world around us. And we're always scanning for what's wrong with us. But we're doing that by comparing ourselves to others,
Yeah.
right? And we don't know everyone's inner world. And what I can tell you from sitting with thousands of people over the years is that people who look like there is absolutely nothing going on have stuff going on. And there people are always, I mean, we're human, and part of being human is navigating, you know, wonderful feelings and really uncomfortable unwanted feelings. And for some people it's anxiety, for other people it's rage or grief or sadness, or I mean, there's so many possibilities, but there really isn't a normal, and I think when you have something like anxiety, it's so easy to look around and feel like you're the only one. You're the only one having this. And it's so present. It's
Yeah.
so common.
Well, and that leads me into my next question, as far as many people who do experience panic attacks feel like they're alone in the struggle. Let's talk about how common these feelings are. I mean, especially today, it seems to be the amount of people seeking treatment for anxiety just continues to go up. So can you shed some light on the prevalence of anxiety disorders, especially in 2023, in comparison to maybe 10 years ago?
Yeah. So it has gone up. It's gone up dramatically. And the pandemic has definitely contributed to that. I think it's this combo, honestly. I think the pandemic definitely turned the volume up on it for many, many people. I think it also led people, I mean, everything stopped for a little while, right?
Yeah.
And we were suddenly, we didn't have our vices that kept us busy or doing and distracted, and so we were left with ourselves and our feelings. And I think for a lot of people it became clear, oh my God, I got to do something about this, which is why it's so challenging to find therapists right now. Everybody's booked because so many people are reaching out for help. And so I think that is a benefit, is that the pandemic has led people to actually reach out for help more so than maybe before. But it's also the numbers are have gone up a lot as well. You
Yeah.
know.
I mean, it definitely is an indication of how prevalent it is and how much you are not alone. I mean, there are so many
Oh,
more support groups and ways to get help between online therapists, in-person therapists. There's always an outlet. So if it is something that you are struggling with, you can find the help. You definitely are not alone. There are literally millions of people that deal with anxiety and panic attacks and anxiety related mental health issues. So
it's
definitely
so true.
do not feel that way, and don't be afraid to reach out for the help that you need.
Yeah, and there is something. Therapy is fantastic, and I think group group work also around panic and anxiety can be really helpful because you sit in a room with a whole bunch of either a room or a virtual room with other people, and you realize, oh my god, they're feeling that too, or oh, they're feeling it in that way, they're experiencing it in that way. And it's a relief because I think as humans we do walk around thinking we're the only ones feeling whatever we're feeling, and it's just not true.
Yeah. And that also brings in the concept of the stigma around mental health and anxiety and panic disorders, and how sometimes people can perceive it as a feeling of making them look weak to the outside world, or not wanting to be comfortable disclosing it to potentially work related or family and friends. Let's what is your thoughts on this, and how do you feel that we can potentially shift our perspective?
Well, yeah, I think there are so many things in our culture that have had such a stigma, and I really see that changing right now in different ways. And some, I so appreciate the people who have more fame, who step forward and
Yeah.
share that they are navigating this kind of thing. Like when Simone Biles, and I mean, there have been numerous people now, and I just cheer them on because it really is it's a message, for others to hear that this is real. Again, this is part of being human, and it doesn't feel like that with how our culture has treated it, but this is going on all the time for many, many people, you know and the way that it changes is to find the people that you feel safe being vulnerable with about having this. Those are the first steps in changing that stigma, because even if it's one person that you can share it with, they're a safe person where they're able to hear you, and you witness that they're not running away from you after they learn this about you, you know
Yeah,
then
the people that truly care about you will support you, and if you feel that somebody dismisses you because of it, is not somebody that you should have in your life.
there you
I
go.
am so thankful of the support that I get from my family and friends, and from work. As far as being understanding of some of the limitations that I have from time to time due to my anxiety, and it took a while to be able to do that. I mean, I've been dealing with anxiety for 20 years. 20 years ago, when I was in my early 20s, and it wasn't discussed, and I literally felt like I was on an island because the internet didn't have a lot of resources. My parents had no idea what I was going through because they hadn't experienced it. No other friends or family in my life had ever
uh,
had this problem. So it was, times have definitely changed, and today's day there's so much more acceptance, as well as resources to try and get help.
it's so true. And um, I think it's the aloneness of that makes it compounds the experience, of feeling so alone and feeling like you're not, like there's a stigma and you're not normal for having it.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
being able
and
to find ways to be a little less alone in it is really powerful.
100%. And I mean, even like meetup groups, they have them. I participated in them in the past, and you go and you meet with people, and you usually deal with different versions or different levels of anxiety. So a lot of times you may be able to help somebody else with their anxiety because you don't have the same one, and they can do the same for you. So it's usually a great supportive experience.
It's so true. And I will also say, as someone with anxiety, I'm betting that there have been lots of times where you've been in it and people have told you all the reasons that you don't need to be feeling this way right now. Do
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
they
And
just
their
calm
their
down.
intentions are really good. They're trying to help, but the reality is you are feeling this way right now. And that's how I learned to think of it for a lot of my life. And then when I started learning to do this, where it's like, it doesn't matter whether this is rational or not. I am experiencing this right now.
Yeah,
And instead of fighting it and trying to tell myself to stop feeling this, to be present with it, it made such a difference in my daughter. She inherited my genes and she's got anxiety too. And she's 12 now. But when she was younger and she would have it, I spent years spending hours talking to her about all the reasons she didn't need to be feeling anxious
yeah,
about whatever it was that was giving her panic. And it would go on and on and on. And when I started doing it differently for myself, one day I thought, let me try it with her. And she came and she was having a panic attack. And I said, honey, I'm just going to sit here with you while you're feeling this way. Okay. We can snuggle if you want, but I'm just going to sit here with you. I just want to be here with you while you're feeling this. And Jeff, I'm not kidding. In like 2 minutes, she had moved through it and she was off and running with her sister. And I was like, what just happened? Now, is that always going to be the case that people are going to move through it in 2 minutes? No, she was younger.
yeah,
But it did drive home that we're needing presence. We're needing people to be present and not try to convince us that it's not rational that we're feeling this way. We need people to acknowledge and be present with us when we're feeling it. And that's so powerful, you know?
yeah. And that leads me to the, rationally speaking, you get a lot of like social media therapists that are like, just lean into your anxiety. And it's like, yes, theoretically, that makes sense. But when you feel like your heart is going to explode out of your chest or you can't breathe, it's not like I want to do that. I just want it to go away as fast
Yeah,
as possible. And, so
totally.
sometimes theoretically and rationally, what makes sense becomes very difficult in the moment.
It's so true. And when you're in panic, that's a different experience. You're right. Versus anxiety. When you're
Yeah.
in it versus panic, you want to get out of it. But the the tricky thing about panic is that when we're in it, our brain is convinced that it's not going to stop,
Yeah.
that it is here for good. It's not going to go away. And we are now doomed with this forever. And so, looking
Well,
when you're outside of the panic and recognizing, okay, every time I've had a panic attack, how long has it lasted? Like, has it lasted forever?
no.
It does have a beginning, a middle, and an eventual end. And so, reminding ourselves of that instead of, it's more about like making room for the fact that it's here, it's hell, and it's here, and saying, okay, what do I need to do in this moment to survive this? Because I think there's going to be an end to it. Another part of me doesn't believe that, but there's going to be an end to it. What do I need to do in this moment? Do I need, and doing the things like looking at the walls, feeling things, feeling the ground, grounding things. For some people, that's really helpful. For others, it's not. But just reminding yourself there is going to be an end to it, because the brain is not convinced of that in the moment.
Yeah, and let's dive into that a little bit more as far as the acceptance of it, because I know, having dealt with this for 20 years, every morning I wake up and you have that brief 15-second period when you open your eyes and you're like, I don't have anxiety anymore, and then it's just like you get up and you start moving through your day, and then it's just like, fuck, here it is again.
I
And
know.
so how, because and then you constantly search for the magic bullet that's going to make it
Oh,
go away forever. And so, obviously neither one of those things are realistic. You're never just wake up one day and it's gone. So how do you work with people as far as the acceptance of it and the fact that, it most likely, if you've been suffering with anxiety for a long time, you may be able to lower it, but you probably are never going to be able to get rid of it. And I mean, because unfortunately, you have with the advent of the internet and social media, you have stuff all the time. Get rid of your anxiety in 4 days,
I
and all
know.
this like magical theories that people are trying to sell you. So where is the acceptance of it versus the trying to eliminate it? How do you work with people on that?
You know, it depends on the person, but in general, um, it really is about getting to know the anxious part more. And like, I literally take people through a process of connecting with the part of them that shows up that has the anxiety and getting to know it more and finding out what is it afraid will happen if it stops giving the anxiety in that moment. And it's pretty wild when you ask a part that question because the
Oh,
part
I can answer that question from myself. My anxiety centers around health, and I my fear is if I let my guard down, then something bad is going to happen, and
right.
that I'm going to have a heart attack, or that I'm going to stop breathing, or like I have this attachment to the anxiety that if I stop and I just relax and I don't think about it anymore, that I'm going to be completely caught off guard. And the ironic part about this, and I haven't discussed this on the podcast yet, but the ironic part about this is I've been anxious for the last 20 years with my quote unquote guard up, and I still got caught completely blindsided last year when I was diagnosed with bone cancer. And I mean, I went tested regularly, physicals once or twice a year, this, that, and the other thing, blood work, all the things, and still there's nothing. There wasn't a damn thing that I was going to be able to do about it, and I've had to deal with it at that point, and thankfully surgeries and everything else, and we're good. But the
Yeah.
anxiety didn't serve me a purpose, but I still haven't been able to get I still haven't been able to get rid of it. I made it through one of the most terrifying things that I created in my head of getting diagnosed with cancer, and I am thankfully knock wood on the other side,
Yeah.
and I still have anxiety. So, to be able to accept it and let your guard down is probably the hardest thing in my opinion that I deal with as far as the anxiety goes.
Yeah. And the truth is, it doesn't stop there when you realize that your fear is that that something's going to happen that's going to cause you to get cancer or cause you to have a heart attack, etc. So then, then the question is, okay, anxious part. So you're afraid that that might happen. So what are you afraid will happen then if that happens?
Yeah.
And you keep going down the spiral asking more questions of this part, and a lot of times what we end up finding is that this anxious part is protecting another part in us that is so scared to be separated from people, to be disconnected from the people that we love, to be alone or to die. And so this anxious part shows up and says, no way. I am going to look for any possible thing that might lead to that, and I am going to have you ready for it at all times. Yeah.
That is me like literally to a T. So the question is, how do you figure out which part of you needs that, I don't know, treatment or like how do you get to that part?
To
In
the part
regards
that,
to just trying to figure out how to address whatever that part of you needs in order to, relax the guard.
yeah. And so that's the wild thing, is that it becomes possible to connect with the part that that anxious part is protecting, and to connect with it, and for us to show up for that part, and for and sometimes it feels possible in the beginning for us to show up for that part that feels so scared and already feels alone or disconnected, right, from things we've had happen in our lives, etc. But Sometimes we have to invite in our minds somebody else to show up for that part in the beginning until we learn to do it for ourselves. And now I will go to that part of me when the anxiety part shows up and starts doing her thing. I'll say, thank you for the clue that this other part is really triggered right now. And I will go to that part and I'll say, honey, I am right here. I know that you're feeling alone. I know that you're feeling totally, it depends on the situation, but abandoned, or um, I know you feel like you're going to die right now. And I just want to be here with you while you're feeling this way. And I know it may sound crazy and even silly, but do you know what happens? That part, after I spend a few moments or minutes with it, it's like that part goes, and it feels seen and acknowledged. And that's what these parts have not had inside us. They have not had that. And when they start feeling seen, something turns down. The volume on it turns down, and you feel it in your body. You feel it in your body. And there are a lot of ways, there are a lot of different approaches that kind of use this approach. Their IFS is one of them, internal family systems it stands for, and there are a lot of therapists who do that. Shadow work is another approach. um, I take a little bit from all of it when I'm working with people.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know one thing that I've definitely dealt with over the course of my journey is feeling frustrated when progress is slower than you want.
Ugh,
How do you keep up your patience,
morale.
motivation, and hope during the times where it's just like, like I'm dealing with it right now. Like I've had so many people suggest to me like EMDR is fantastic and you should do it. And I've been seeing an EMDR therapist for the last 3 months, and we're doing next to no EMDR, and all she wants to do is talk about the different parts and addressing those first before. And it is driving me crazy as far as that goes, because it's like, just get to the part where you're gonna cure me so that we can move on and I can do the things that I want to do. So, how do you handle that for the purposes of, you know, trying to keep people hopeful that you're moving in the right direction and motivated towards, doing the work?
Well, I have a few answers to that. I do have people who come into my office and we do parts work, and it doesn't feel good to them. And that's not wrong. That means that's not the right approach for them. And I do feel that people innately like honoring what they're feeling is really important. And so, of course, I have people come in who've been making progress, and then suddenly it feels like it's gone all backwards. The truth is, they haven't lost what they've gained. When we're talking about, do you know about neural pathways?
Yes, but
Yeah,
explain it for those that are listening that may not.
yeah, totally. So neural pathways are these pathways in our brain that get established that give us particular responses to things. So for example, with anxiety, if anxiety shows up in your body, you're likely to have a very particular response when it shows up. And when we've had that response for a long time, those neural pathways, it's like they have deep grooves that they're very worn with that response. And what we've discovered over the years is that we can develop new neural pathways that ultimately allow our brain to have new responses over time. And so, you know, those, if we're feeding, we build new, you can start building a new neural pathway and doing something differently for 1 or 2 seconds. It starts to form a new pathway. Does that mean your brain's going to say, oh, great, look at this new path I can take? No, it's going to be this really shallow path in the beginning. So you won't feel it. But each time you practice that for 1 or 2 seconds or more, it's furthering that path. Does that path, when we go, feels like we're going backwards? does that new path go away? No, it's still very much there, but we're just not using it right that second. And that's one of the things that I talk to people about. Those new pathways they've been working on have not gone away. They're just, the old path is being used right now. And, I think it's really hard when someone's navigating anxiety and panic, because it can feel like you either have to do something this way to recover from it, or you're going backwards and doing it the old way. And I really do. That is why I work with people in the micro moment, like doing things sometimes literally for 1 or 2 seconds a different way, and then doing it the way that you have to do it in that moment, right? And
Yeah.
then down the road, doing it for 1 or 2 seconds. Those 1 or 2 seconds, that builds our tolerance to that feeling. It builds our tolerance to being in it and doing it differently for 1 or 2 seconds. And those seconds become longer over time, and it becomes different. Our experience changes. So I don't know if that answers your question. Um,
Not, I mean, it's a good response to a question. My question is more like, how do you keep up people's motivation that aren't getting the results that they're looking like? Obviously everybody wants immediate gratification. That's just the way we are as a society now. And dealing with mental health, there's never going to be that. So, as I said, when people are frustrated and dealing with this, how do you keep up their hope and their motivation to keep working and keep moving forward to getting better?
well, I am one of those people who always feels that there's hope. And again, when someone is coming in, and if they're not feeling like they're making progress the whole time we're working together, then we absolutely have to evaluate the approaches and how we're doing it. And if there is something that's going to feel like a better fit for them, you know, whether it's with me or someone else. But if somebody had been making progress and then suddenly it feels like it's going backwards, then we bring curiosity to it about what's happening right now, this triggering this in a way that's feeling like it's going this way. Why is the anxious part needing to show up so loudly again right now? Because it's not usually random. There is some little thing that is contributing to it. And so we explore it. We explore it with curiosity. And I don't see that as wrong. I absolutely know personally and from working with people how uncomfortable it is when it feels like it's going backwards. But sometimes that backwards is a springboard to do a big jump after that. So we
Yeah.
just look at what the approach is. And um, the biggest thing that I can say, Jeff, is that I really find ways to make whatever is going on to help them move into this acceptance, even if it's that they're so frustrated, like what you're saying, that you're so frustrated. I don't think the goal is to try to just keep pushing past the frustration and wait for the EMDR. Maybe it's that the EMDR, it's time to start it. Or maybe it's like, let's look at this frustration part for a minute. Like, what is this about?
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Um, and then the one of the last questions that I have is for those that are trying to support a loved one dealing with anxiety or panic attacks. What advice would you give them to help their loved one feel more understood and less alone?
well, it's a few things. First of all, what I mentioned before about not spending a lot of energy trying to convince them of all the reasons that they don't need to be feeling this way, because it doesn't work. It doesn't work to tell someone who's, spinning out with anxiety or panic that they don't need to be feeling this way, because it's basically saying they shouldn't be feeling this way, and they are feeling this way.
Yeah.
So to not tell them that they're wrong, but to be present with them, and to just let them know they want to be here with them while they're feeling this way, and that they know. I think the biggest thing is to support people in, because they're not going to believe that they're going to be able to cope with their anxiety. It feels like they're not going to be able to cope with it, when it gets really big. But helping people know that you believe that they're going to be able to cope with this and still have life. Um, what I mean by that is, it's like my daughter has had big anxiety this year, and we were spending a lot of time talking to her about all the details of what she was anxious about, and it wasn't helping. It wasn't
Yeah.
helping. And when we started saying, she was getting ready for sleepover camp, and this year it felt impossible for her to go, and we were thinking, how's this going to work? And then when we started saying, you know what, you got this. You can't plan to go there without your anxiety. Your anxiety is going to go with you. It's going to be there with you, and you're going to be able to cope with it. And you're going to discover, even with your anxiety, you're still going to be able to have a good time some of the time. And that actually changed how she was feeling in that experience. And I think that's the case for how we can support a lot of people that we love who have anxiety. It isn't about trying to help them figure out how to make it go away, because it's here. They can work on that with therapists or groups or other support. But as people who love people with anxiety, showing up for them and helping them know that you believe in them, that they're going to be able to be okay even with their anxiety as part of the picture, makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So the last question that I ask everybody is, what is your best piece of advice to give to somebody dealing with panic and anxiety issues?
My best piece of advice is to not look for people who are going to promise you that they can help you get rid of it, because it's just not true. Does it mean that you're going to always have to have the volume be this high? No. And maybe you're going to be somebody where it's going to go away, but for a lot of us, it is a part of our lives. But to be able to change your relationship with that anxiety so it's not your enemy actually allows you to change your experience with it. And so that's would be my biggest advice, is to find people who can help you to create a new relationship with your anxiety, where it doesn't have to be your enemy, because it's going to end up giving you a different experience with it. So somebody who can help you move from this to this, do this dance.
All
And
right.
there are lots of people who do that.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of fantastic therapists and counselors out there that can definitely help. And if you are struggling, highly recommend, getting the assistance that you need. There is so much of it out there. And if you don't find somebody that you can work with on the first try, try again.
Yes,
It's not impossible.
totally.
Um, Thank you so much, Dr. Colwell. Once again, we've been talking to Dr. Emily Colwell. You can find her on her website, Dr. Emily, COLWELL.com, or on Instagram, Dr.Emily_Colwell. It has been a pleasure talking to you. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.